So hi everyone, my name is Alondra Jean Gomez, and for today's discussion, we're going to tackle about portfolio management. So let's start. We have here theories. We have two theories. The first one is Markowitz model. So Harry Markowitz is an American economist and creator of the influential modern portfolio theory, MPT, which is still widely used today. So Markowitz published his piece on MPT in 1952. So Markowitz model is also called as mean variance model due to the fact that it is based on expected returns, which is the mean, and the standard variation, which is the variance of the various portfolios. So it assists in the selections of the most efficient portfolio by analyzing various possible portfolio of the given securities. So the modern portfolio theory, which is the Markowitz model, is an asset allocation theory that uses concepts such as correlation, risk, and return to find the optimal portfolio weighings. So the theory assumes investors are risk averse and concludes that diversification can reduce portfolio risk. So the theory assumes that investors are risk averse, meaning that between two portfolios with the same risk, investors prefer the one with a higher return. So let's say for example, when a certain or an investor is at risk and in between two risks, they are going to choose the ones with has higher return. Let's say example, they're in risk and um they are choosing which are they going. So they are going to choose as always the higher one. I mean the higher return. So because individual investors has different risk tolerances, Markowitz developed the efficient frontier, which each point along the curve represents the optimal assets weighing in a portfolio. So this model has assumptions. So Markowitz made the following assumptions while developing the HM model. They are 7 assumptions. The first one is risk of a portfolio in based on the variability of returns from said portfolio. An investor is risk averse. An investor prefers to increase consumption. The investor's utility function is concave and increasing due to the risk aversion and consumption preference. Analysis is based on a single period model of investment. An investor either maximizes their portfolio return for a given level of risk or maximizes the risk for a given return. And the last one is an investor is rational in nature. So let's proceed to the other theory. So this one is Baumol's model. So this model is an economic model of the transactions demand for money as developed independently by William Baumol 1952 and James Dubin of 1956. So the model was originally developed to provide micro foundation for aggregate money demand functions commonly used in Keynesian and monetarist macroeconomic models of the time. So later on, the model was extended to a general equilibrium setting by Boyan Jovanovic of 1982 and David Romer of 1986. So it is usually used in inventory management but has its application in determining the optimal cash balance. So this model is usually used for cash management, which is specifically used in inventory, such as determining the cash balance of a certain organization, company, or group. So it also has assumptions. So it has 4 assumptions. These are the minimum cash balance is 0, which is no borrowing. The interest rate is constant. Opportunity cost for holding cash. Money can only be held or invested in short-term money market securities. And total cash requirements are known and cash is spent at a constant rate. So let's proceed to its formula. So shown here is the formula of Baumol's model. So C equals 2A times F over O. So whereas C is equal to optimum balance, A is annual or monthly cash disbursements, F is for fixed costs per transaction, and O is for opportunity cost of a holding cash. So moving forward to steps of portfolio management. So this one has 7 steps. The first one is identification of objectives and constraints. So it is a primary step in the portfolio management process to identify the limitations and objectives. So the portfolio management should focus on objectives and constraints of an investor in first place. So the objective of an investor may be income with minimum amount of risk, capital appreciation, or for future provision. The relative importance of these objectives should be clearly defined. So before going to or before investing, we should need to identify the objectives or constraint of an investor so that in the near future we are able to catch up or knowledgeable with regards to their objective or we say future provisions of that certain, not just to the investor but also to the certain company or organization. So the next one is selection of the selection of the asset mix rather. So the next major step in the portfolio management process is identifying different assets that can be included in portfolio in order to spread risk and minimize loss. So in this step, the relationship between securities has to clearly specified. Portfolio may contain the mixed preference shares, equity shares, bonds, and etc. So the percentage of the mix depends upon the risk tolerance and investment limit of the investor. So from the word itself, asset. So asset is something that we own. So in case that bitong risk may occur, so in order to minimize loss, you can also use your asset for an exchange. So the next one is formulation of portfolio strategy. So after a certain asset mix is chosen, the next step in the portfolio management process is formulation of an appropriate portfolio strategy. So it has 2 choices in formulation of portfolio strategy. So these are an active portfolio strategy and a passive portfolio strategy. So an active portfolio strategy attempts to earn a superior risk-adjusted return by adopting the market timing, switching from one sector to another sector according to market condition, security selection, or a combination of all of these. So the next one is a passive portfolio. So a passive portfolio strategy, on the other hand, has a predetermined level of exposure of risks. So the portfolio is broadly diversified and maintained strictly. So on the fourth step is security analysis. So in this step, an investor actively involves himself in selecting securities. So security analysis requires the source of information on the basis of which analysis is made. Securities for the portfolio are analyzed taking into account of their price, possible return, risk associated with, etc. So as the return on investment is linked to the risk associated with the security analysis helps to understand the nature and extent of the risk of a particular security in the market. So the market analysis involves both macro and micro analysis. So the next one is portfolio execution. So when a selection of securities for investment is complete, the execution of portfolio plan takes the next stage in the portfolio management process. So portfolio execution is related to buying and selling of specified securities in a given amount. As portfolio executed has a bearing on investment results, it is considered one of the important steps in the portfolio management. So, after executing the four steps, proceeding to this step is the very important one. So you should make sure that you have executed properly or did properly the four steps. So the sixth step is portfolio revision. So portfolio revision is one of the most important steps in portfolio management. A portfolio manager has to constantly monitor and review scripts according to the market condition. So revision of portfolio includes adding or removing scripts, shifting from the one stock to another or from stocks to bonds and vice versa. So moving forward to the last step is performance evaluation. So evaluating the performance of portfolio is another important step in portfolio management. So portfolio manager has to assess the performance of portfolio over a selected period of time. So performance evaluation includes assessing the relative merits and demerits of portfolio risk and return criteria, adherence of portfolio management to publicly stated investment objectives, or some combination of these factors. So performance evaluation gives us a useful feedback to improve the quality of portfolio management process on a continuing basis. So these 7 steps are very important in a performance management in order to attain success and in order to minimize or avoid risk or consequence. One should follow this one so that it will it will become successful, and certain investor or a certain company will able to minimize its loss or risk in the future. So the last discussion that we're going to do is the types of risk in portfolio management. So there are two types of risk. They are systematic and unsystematic risk. So the first one is systematic risk. It is vulnerability to events which affects aggregate outcomes such as broad market returns, total economy-wide resource holdings, or aggregate income. So example of this risk includes macroeconomic factors such as inflation. So we already know what inflation is. Interest rates, currency fluctuations, environmental factors such as climate change, natural disasters, resource, and biodiversity loss. So social factors such as war, changing consumers' perspective, population trends are examples of systematic risk. So moving forward to the last discussion is the systematic risk. So it is associated with a specific industry, segment, or security. So the following are examples of unsystematic risk: a change in regulations that impacts one industry, the entry of a new competitor into the market, a company is forced to recall one of its products, a company is found to have prepared fraudulent financial statements, a union targets a company for a employee walkout, and the last one is a foreign government expropriates the assets of a specific company. So it is understandable that when we say unsystematic, it is referred to the main problem or risk with regards to the industry, segments, or security. So that's all for today's discussion. I hope you learned something, and thank you for listening. God bless us all.